Alrighty then, it's 5:03. I'd like to call this workshop of the Belton Independent School District Board of Trustees to order. A quorum of board members is present. This workshop has been duly called and a notice of the workshop has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Welcome, everyone. We're going to begin with public comments. Ms. Burns, do we have anybody signed up for public comments? Then we'll just move on to the next item on the agenda and just get started with our workshop.
Madam President, members of the board, we have Elizabeth Cox here tonight, and we are going to be talking about Goal 1 items this evening in our workshop. And again, workshops are designed to be collaborative conversations between the administration and the Board of Trustees. And tonight's topics are two topics that I think are pretty important ones. First, we have an upcoming legislative session, and we would like to engage in a discussion with you all about important topics for the upcoming legislative session. And Elizabeth's going to be leading us through that conversation tonight.
Yeah. Awesome. Good evening. Thank you, Superintendent Smith. Next slide, please. As Matt said, we're here this evening, or I'm standing before you this evening to talk about something that's coming up in 2021. I think a lot of us are anticipating a lot with the end of 2020, but I can tell you one thing's for sure, the state legislature is going to meet somehow coming up in January of 2021. To support the board in their roles as advocates for public education during the upcoming legislative session, we'd like to discuss with you all tonight the topics of interest that you all share so that we can develop a 2021 Belton ISD legislative priorities list. Next slide, please. I think it's important to point out that a school board member has several really important roles, and one of those is to be an advocate of public schools in Texas. TASB puts it this way: board members are the link between the school system and the public. As advocates for public education, board members help grow community support for public schools. I think every legislative session is a great opportunity to show our support for public schools, but this next one coming up next year will not be any different. Next slide, please. Looking ahead to the 87th legislative session in Texas, there are a lot of unique challenges facing lawmakers and advocates alike, advocates including school board members who'd like to talk about public education with their elected leaders. Those include a budget deficit. When the session starts on January 12th, all members will have heard a thing or two from the comptroller about budget estimates that reflect historic declines in state revenue streams, such as taxes related to alcohol sales, hotel occupancy, and oil and gas production. Those sectors have seen more than 40% declines in the same period as last year. Sales tax revenues are the one bright spot, and that rings true here in Bell County as well. The comptroller most recently reported in November that those revenues have only fallen by 4.8% in the second half of the 2020 fiscal year, but it's still down. Crafting a state budget is hard enough work for our elected leaders when the economic times are good. This will be the first legislative session for many in these two different bodies, the Senate and the House, when decisions are being made to address what could be with a $4.6 billion deficit in this next biennium. Historical references are being drawn by a lot of folks to the 2011 legislative session, but many have said that there are not many serving in this Texas legislature right now that were around for that time. So it's just important to keep that context as we move forward. There's also going to be new leadership in the House. House members will officially cast a vote for Speaker on the first day of legislative session, though Representative Dade Phelan of Beaumont has already pretty much started moving himself into those Speaker's offices. Phelan is part of Bonin's leadership team from the last legislative session, so many aren't anticipating lots of shakeups or changes in leadership for committees, but we won't know the committee makeups until likely the end of January, beginning of February. So that new House leadership is important to note. And then the thing that is still kind of unfolding before us, and Representative Shine talked a lot about it this morning in his update to the Belton Chamber, is how the state legislature and the Capitol itself are going to respond to COVID-19, what sorts of precautions they're going to put in place, and how they're going to allow, or what they are going to do to protect members and their staffs during this time. That can look like National Guard requiring rapid testing of those that are allowed into the Capitol, limiting floor access, and all sorts of virtual testimony things being considered. But those are all complex procedural issues. Representative Shine was quick to point out that you'll hear the Lieutenant Governor talking about the Senate, but that's a body of 31 senators that he's taking care of. The House has to consider 150 members at any one time on the House floor. So we'll be tuning in to what those precautions are going to look like, but it will impact the way that we are able to take our message and our advocacy efforts to the Capitol or to our legislators this session.
And I think that is one of the key reasons why this is a topic for us to discuss in depth tonight and to get into some conversations about this is we don't know what actual access to the Capitol is going to look like in this legislative session. So imagine some of the advocacy groups that you've relied on in the past to be down there using their voice to advocate for local school boards and local communities for maybe local control or for less testing or whatever it might be. They may not have the same access that they've had in the past. And so in that conversation that was had this morning with Representative Shine with a group in the community, he pointed out there are some standing meetings that are already in place between a lot of representatives in their local communities, just like the one he had this morning with people who joined through the chamber in Belton. And why we bring this up now is this list of information or this prioritization of topics for us to consider at this time helps us all have talking points on a regular basis for whomever that we see, whether it's you, Shine, on when we're passing them in the local community, or whether you are at an event with Dawn Buckingham coming up, or whether it's you have a couple of work colleagues that are in advocacy roles in some state organizations, and they say to you, what are your legislative priorities in Belton ISD, or what are you most concerned about in this legislative session? That's the reason for this list coming up, because some of the access concerns that we have are I think, pretty legitimate ones for this upcoming legislative session. The final thing I'll say on this topic is Representative Shine also talked a little bit this morning about something that I just hadn't caught on to. He talked about virtual testimony or people going down and giving some kind of virtual input on bills that are in front. Well, virtual actually opens it up far more than in-person testimony in the past has. So imagine that if you have a hot topic in the state of Texas, how many people might be signing up for virtual testimony? So we have to figure out other ways that we may have had an opportunity in the past to go down and testify on something. We may not have that if 10,000 people to sign up to have comment on something. So this list of topics is going to be really important for us, not only to advocate with our local representatives, but for us to have constant communication with the people we come in contact to so that we make sure our voices are well heard in the legislative session.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide, please. So with that great setup, what legislative topics are of interest to you as Belton ISD board members? I think this is where we'd like to kind of open it up, see if anything jumps out. You all have a list in front of you if you want to go off of that, or if there's another topic. Matt mentioned several, like local control.
Well, one of the ones I think that just comes immediately to me is school finance, making sure that we are able to maintain what we have and that it's supplemented in the future to come. So making sure public schools are well funded.
Thank you.
The initial conversation that we are hearing on that one too is rather interesting. I think Suzanne was at a meeting with me not too long ago when we heard a representative say that everybody's going to need to do their fair share. So school finance in the time of a deficit of estimates between $4 billion and $7 billion or anything that I've heard is going to be an interesting one, and a lot of people are narrowing in on how to talk about that, specifically about like House Bill 3. And with the passage of House Bill 3 in the past, the stabilization of funding or continuing funding that was approved for House Bill 3, not cutting what was already approved is the way some are talking about that. So,
to build on what Matt was saying, a great deal of the investment that legislators made in the last session through House Bill 3 is either just now getting started or is about to get started. They haven't gotten to see the fruits of that labor yet, and so it really is important that that funding be sustained. Any other topics?
I'm sorry, I promise I'm going to stop talking in a few minutes. One of those things, an example of that is the teacher incentive allotment that you have heard about, that we have presented to you about. Todd has given you some information on this in past board meetings, in fact. The teacher incentive allotment was a chunk of money that's set aside for incentivizing teachers to be in certain schools throughout the state of Texas and to hopefully perform well for our students, right? While it's a good premise behind it all, there are a lot of things that come with that, and that's ranking and sorting of teachers and who gets what money and how much can they get and all sorts of things to that nature. But there's a pot of money through House Bill 3 that is set aside for that actual thing to happen. We have initial cohorts in the state that are actually starting to develop plans on that, but one of the advocacy things or the asks that we might have is that to stop funding for the teacher incentive allotment and make sure that we can fund all the other programs that are part of the basic allotment for schools and not the add-ons like the teacher incentive allotment. So just an example of House Bill 3, how complex it is. There are a lot of pieces and parts of it. That's one of those things that we may want to say, you know what, in Belton ISD, it's far more important for us to say, let's maintain the basic allotment that we get for kids, and let's take these other programs that were add-ons in the past legislative session and put them on hold.
So I've got a question, and it's related to the STAR test. And I know they're going to make us take the test this year, even though we've been through all this stuff. Have they indicated whether or not these results are going to be made public, or are these just going to be for the districts to disseminate on their own? What exactly are we going to gain from having dumped school last spring break, basically, picking it up, and whatever district across the state, and everybody's doing it so differently, it seems like. Have they said one way or the other what they're going to make us do with that information? Are they going to put those grades in the paper like they did last time? How's that going to work? And can we do anything about it during this session?
I was hoping Elizabeth would jump in on that one. No.
So I'll give, I would anticipate that TEA will not miss the opportunity to utilize the website that they created for parents to access and see the portal for grades on the STAR testing and things like that. So will the public have access? I believe they will find a way if we get to the point of STAR being administered. Deanna, did you hear specifically?
I did. They haven't said if I'm expecting that they're going to publish the results. I would be surprised if they didn't. All they have told us at this time is that A through F is suspended, so we will not receive a rating of results.
Now, Matt, go.
I have strong opinions on this
Yeah,
topic, and I do my best not to say them out loud often because I get
Oh, no, we
fired
like
up.
them. Go.
But so I don't see any purpose in this testing because basically what they're saying is that teachers and school districts cannot assess student progress on their own, and therefore the STAR test must be the only way for us to assess how students are doing in the state. And I just fully reject that notion. I think our teachers actually have a far better idea of what's going on with student learning than a STAR test can ever give. I say that because I believe they will make these public. I believe that you are going to hear stories in the state about how much our students have lost because of COVID. And I wonder sometimes who is making that determination on what students have lost, because if it's the STAR test, if it's according to the STAR test, well, we also know that different states have different tests. So who is it that's making this benchmark of what students, quote, have lost in all of this? The second point that I want to make real quick is that I received an email this morning, and I don't know how this will be handled. The email said, we're remote learners in Belton ISD, and I don't want my students to come in to take a STAR test. So please make sure that we have a remote opportunity for our students to engage in the STAR test. Makes total sense when you have remote opportunities for students, right? I don't know how the state is going to be able to know and understand validity of testing when you have students that might engage in testing at off-site locations like their homes. And so I really question what we are going to get out of the STAR test for this year. I am not a fan of STAR testing in normal years, but in a year like this, I personally think it's a waste of an undue stress and pressure on our system. As far as advocacy, Ty, to answer your question, that might be one of those talking points that we have in our back pocket on a regular basis so that all of our representatives know and understand, yeah, we'd like to see that STAR test go away in the spring. I'd rather our teachers focus on seeing their kids that are in front of them and not worry about that standardized test. We'll deal with that when it comes back and we're in full swing again. So hence the reason we're have that one on accountability and assessment on here.
You know, and something else I was thinking about when you were talking, the initial part of your presentation, you know, they could take a look at what the MLB and the NBA did with the bubbles and maybe pattern themselves a little bit after that. What is it, 180 something days that they are, you know, meeting? Will they, you know, bubble themselves somehow? Or I wonder, as we see the vaccine roll out, I know like today it was healthcare workers, and then there's going to be different categories. I wonder if they'll bump them up the list to get the vaccines, you know, so we can have a contiguous session, if that makes sense.
Yes, sir. Especially as they get into the later parts of the session where the action really gets going. We could definitely see something like that. All Representative Shine really addressed today was just the access to testing and how I think he said specifically that the National Guard has said they could test 12 people an hour or something like that to get people moving in and out. The vaccine didn't come up today, but you're not wrong. I'm sure there are folks that are sports fans looking at how the NBA and the Major League Baseball did it as well.
Well, they just came up with something that worked, and when those people were in that bubble, they had to sacrifice family time and at home, but they did it to make that work, for that revenue being brought in. You know, this is a big deal, this legislative session every 2 years, so.
Though some have said that the legislators being in a bubble amongst themselves without the access being given to advocates such as yourself creates a more opportunity for a secretive session or not the same kind of level of policy making engagement.
I've read that article, and I see some validity in that point, that they could, you know, use this to keep away from us, but with the cameras and the Zooms and, you know, like, you know, we can only go into closed session for just for 2 things, that's it. So is there a limit to what they can go behind closed doors and talk about, you know? So whatever that isn't specified, it can be, like Matt said, even more accessible to the public because the cameras, and now we've figured out all the Zooms and things, so maybe we'll have more access, I don't know.
I like your positivity. We'll go with that. We'll stay there.
I have a question back to the STAR testing. Dr. Smith and I discussed this last week. My question is, we've got roughly 21%, is that our number still, that are at-home learners?
It's increased just a little bit. I don't have it right off the top of my head, but it's increased just a little bit since then.
So if we're anywhere near a state average, and let's say we're averaging around 25% in the state, well, you're not going to be able to set up remote locations because the same person who is concerned about their kid going to school is obviously not going to let them go somewhere in public or to some other location to take a test. And then, I guess here's my question, but I don't understand how they're going to do this. You've got the legislature's meeting. The first administration of the STAR test would be early spring, is that correct? Isn't that right, Matt? Early spring?
Yes, sir. Well, it'd probably be March-ish, I believe, would be first administration.
So there's no way that the state legislature and the TEA will have anything laid out between now and then. So if you've got, let's say, I mean, more than likely, we're going to have students who, if they're tied to STAR testing moving up to the next grade, how are they going to be able to take it? It doesn't even seem possible for them to be able to take it, and you're not going to hold back a kid who couldn't take it because of COVID. But at the same time, if you had 25% of your, I mean, let's just face it, if a parent found out that these other kids were able to take the STAR test somehow unmonitored at home and their kid is stuck at school taking it, they're not going to be happy about this. I mean, and rightfully so. So is this a TEA thing? Does TEA have to go to the legislature? I mean, they're in new grounds here. They don't know what they're doing. Do we have any idea what they're thinking about doing?
They have addressed the grade promotion portion. That was the first thing they addressed early. I think that right before the school got started, or in August sometime, about promotion. The point you were making, Jeff, about grade promotion and STAR.
Yeah, and Jeff, you're the only one I can't see. It's
Yeah.
good to see you down there, Jeff.
I can see the top of your head.
Okay, good. So a couple of things on that real quick. Yes, I mean, their inaction so far is one of the challenging things. Here's the information I was given over the summer when I met with one of our elected officials about this, and the information was that we would have to seek a waiver from the federal government in order to actually waive the STAR test because of federal requirements. And I think my response at that time was, I understand that, so can we seek that waiver? Like, let's take a stand and start to seek that waiver now because of the exact predicament that you're talking about now, Jeff, because now we're in the spot where if it would take a waiver from the federal government to make sure that we don't have to participate in STAR testing, then our timeline is going to be really tight along the spring. And can the legislature actually do anything in their short window to help us with that? My answer to that is I don't really know, but I think it's worth us advocating for loudly about because, again, to your point, we're going to have a lot of students who, in Belton ISD, I'm proud that we have a lot that are face-to-face, but we still have a lot that are virtual learners. A lot of students in our system might not be able to take those assessments, and we've got to figure out a way to move us forward as a whole system. So,
Okay. And then, kind of a follow-up, but my next question is, at the very top, obviously, we're school board towards local control, but since this is put here, is there a belief that this legislature is going to steer control back to the state, away from the local communities? Is that, I mean, there must be grumblings of something out there.
Right. There is a lot of grumblings depending on which elected board you sit on, exactly how you're impacted by the different efforts that have come from the state legislature over the last few years to move away from local control and take the opportunity to make decisions about funding and tax it money and invest it the way you would see fit and direct it elsewhere. And so I think specifically one of the things that has come up for school boards recently has been the way that COVID-19 has been responded to by TEA and the decision-making that's come out of TEA versus the decision-making that a local board could do. And I'm looking at Chris. I know you had some experience on another taxing entity board. Do you have any input on that?
I don't know, right? I mean, I kind of had the same question Jeff had, actually. You know, I do see the way that some of the COVID-19 response has gone has been, you know, they've tried to centralize, and we've seen how that's gone, right? I mean, you try to centralize, and yet you don't have a whole lot of detail on implementation, and the devil's in the details, right? I mean, we really needed to get into the weeds for things that were going to work for us, right? And so I think general concept-wise, right, I think we would want to try to keep as much local control as we possibly can, right? I mean, we are certainly way more in touch with the local community than, you know, than folks in Austin necessarily are. But we also do want to be able to access and leverage, you know, lessons learned and best practices across the state. But, you know, there's probably ways for us to do that without, you know, without necessarily having everything run through TEA. I don't know. I mean, it's all tied into the STAR test too, right? I mean, yeah.
One of the other things that's come up quite a bit about local, and it's tied in with another topic on there about fund balance, but about local control is it's been very directly said by some elected officials in the state that in order to balance our budget this upcoming session, we're going to take a look at school districts' fund balances, which is a real interesting thing because local school districts and local trustees are elected to be stewards of the taxpayer dollars for that local school district. And fund balance is directly tied to the efforts of the local school board in each case. And so in the challenge that we have in front of us, one of the topics that we believe will come up and has been directly stated will come up along the way is we're going to need school districts to do their fair share to help us balance the budget. Well, I think that's another example of one of those things about local control is based on that money that's in that fund balance right now, who has control over it? Is it TEA? Is it our state elected officials? Or is it our local elected officials like our school boards?
Yeah. I mean, this is a particular challenge for us, right? Fast growth school district. I mean, we've got a lot of challenges that only money's going to solve, right? I mean, we've got a lot of teachers that we need to hire next year and the year after, right? As we look at filling out the teachers at like Lake Belton High School, right? And then we've also got planning that we need to do for additional facilities, right? Potential replacement of facilities. Like you can't do any of that stuff without money. And I feel like we've done a great job right? Of setting ourselves up to make some of those decisions and to stay, in a good financial position. And we were talking about our bond rating last time and all that kind of stuff, right? Like, I think we've shown we're doing this stuff responsibly. And if we're not doing it responsibly, like, we can't do all those things that, are on our list that we have to do. And so in my mind, like, if you look at, sort of everything that's in front of us, even if we didn't have this in front of us, right? I mean, the one thing that keeps me up at night is anything that has to do with the financials, right? Because, in our situation, right, we are residential rooftop heavy, and with everything that we've got to do, it all comes down to the financials, and we can't end up taking it to, and we got to try to be careful with the local taxpayer, right? I mean, I don't know. So in my mind, like, that's probably like my single one thing, right? Is going to be, okay, how do we make the most out of the financials? And yeah.
Manuel, I think you had something next, right? Yes, sir.
You have anything else, Chris?
No, that's all right. I'm
Oh,
good.
I don't know that I have a question, but more of a, I guess, expand more on what Matt has said and what Suzanne said. I think my biggest concern is the domino effect that this pandemic's going to have. I mean, we can sit up here and guess all day what's going to happen with that, and maybe make a pretty good educated guess about it. But it seems to me that as a member of this community all my life, it seems like, if I think about it, this board, as well as boards behind us and administrations behind us, have always been a step ahead in planning and doing a good job with that, and not getting caught in a bad situation where we didn't plan ahead. So it seems to me that the fiscal management is going to be probably more important now than it has ever been in the history of this district. I think we're in good shape just listening to Jennifer's reports here most recently. And one of the things that I wanted to ask, and Elizabeth, you might be able to tell me, is these advocacy groups that always are up there at the legislative sessions doing different things for different companies and different folks. What are they saying? I mean, how are they going to approach things this session?
They're working their phones already. That's what I'll tell you. They're trying to make phone calls and make sure that they're tracking staff changes right now. My cabinet colleagues and I had the chance to listen to a veteran of the state legislature and state public education a week ago, and he just talked a lot about how they're right now just tracking staff changes over the phone and trying to, I guess, see people as they could in Austin, and then looking at bills that are being filed. The filing of bills has already begun, and so they're tracking those. But one of the other kind of side effects of the COVID precautions is that there's an anticipation that the number of bills that get heard in committees and things like that will be actually much less than what a normal legislative session could entail. That was something that Representative Shine shared with us. So they're using a lot of their usual tools. For them, it's not a big change. The big change is folks like you being able to come down for advocacy days and to share your story, to be able to help echo or put a personal district and student face to the items that they're tracking already, or the issues that they've been talking to them about. And that's a really big part of how movement happens, is when they actually hear a direct story from a school district or a school board member of how a student is impacted. It makes a big difference. And so the way that we're going to be able to have that impact that moves the needle is going to be more of a challenge. And I think that's why they're spending more time with folks like us, talking to us about how we develop our own legislative priorities to tell that story.
Now, Matt, you mentioned that the House Bill 3, those teacher incentive funds were actually set aside. Are there any other funds that were set aside under House Bill 3?
You know, Jennifer Land is unable to be here tonight, but I'd have to rely on her for some of those answers. She knows far better than I do. I can tell you the teacher incentive allotment is the one that is really the most interesting for me, because they are funds that are not yet expended, right? So they're not funds that people have built into their budgets in school districts at this point. Now, there are a couple districts across the state that are leaders in this teacher incentive allotment, and they're making plans and moving forward, but it's not like payments have been issued to those school districts at this time, from my understanding. So in my mind, that's one of those things to say, hey, let's hold on this and pause for a while. And I want to be really clear, just to add on to this. It is not that I, in any way, shape, or form, oppose providing more money into our teachers' pockets. In fact, it's the opposite. I want to make sure that all of our teachers get paid and compensated appropriately. But when we create ranking systems where only a few people can get a large amount, and we haven't funded that yet, and the legislature is saying we're going to fund that in the future, that seems to me to be one of those things that we could hold on to for right now and focus on making sure that the rest of House Bill 3 is fully funded.
Is there any talk about where the feds are on all this?
Elizabeth, do you know better than I don't? That's a great question, because I don't really know on that one.
I mean, is there any talk about what they may or may not do?
The federal government's about to undergo its own bureaucratic changeover over the regulatory agencies. With the Biden administration coming in, we're probably about to see some changes. And so I think anyone who is predicting what could be or what they might say, I don't know if we've gotten there yet. And I don't know that any of it, to Jeff's great point earlier, any of it will come in time to actually, the federal government is known for being pretty slow when acting and when making movement. I don't know if any of it will come in time to make a big impact on us in the spring or maybe in the fall.
And then the last thing, Matt, is are we looking at the potential worst-case scenario from the legislature and then what we can do to prepare ourselves for that?
So in January, at our January board meeting, Ms. Land is going to be here in front of you, and we're going to go through a set of questions and discussions about budget assumptions. And we're going to ask our whole board to help us with that determination, because there's a fine balance between being too conservative and too maybe loose with our projections in that. So that decision will be made when we start talking about budget assumptions at the next board meeting. I will say one other thing, Manuel. You asked about House Bill 3 and funding. I think one other bucket of money, and I don't think it was originally designated under House Bill 3, but that's fast growth schools money that I think is important for us to keep in mind as well. As we know, Belton ISD is one of the only school districts in the area that is growing and meeting our projected growth rates. And I think it's important for us to keep that in mind too. While it might not be, I don't believe, I'll have to do a double check. I don't believe it was designated separately under House Bill 3 as anything new, but fast growth schools money is going to be an important thing for us to focus on moving forward as well.
I mean, I think it's important we kind of look at the legislative priorities maybe two ways, right? It's what do we need going forward, right? And for us, like we hit fast growth and all that kind of stuff. But we also need to look in the rearview mirror and how do we recover, right? And how do we recover covers lots of things, right? I mean, it covers things like expenses that we had to, incur, to get to where we are today, whether that's PPE, whether it's technology, whether it's whatever the case may be, right? But how do we recover is also, like, you also look at the students, right? And so when you think about the mental health aspect of it, like students and staff for that matter, right? I mean, so is there something from a mental health perspective, like we've got to be able to completely sort of wrap our arms around what's just happened, who's been impacted by it, and how do we take that and try to get that back to whatever the new normal is going to be. And so, I feel like we've got to get something around mental health and support for our students and staff into that too. How do we fix the mess, and then how do we go forward? Or how do we help the mess, and how do we move forward?
And Chris, I think you make a great point. That's one topic we haven't addressed just yet. The 86th legislative session addressed school safety and mental health a great deal. They made a lot of strides with those different topics, but the lens that they were looking through was looking back at some tragedies that had happened in our country around gun violence. And so I think that it's interesting to think through what sort of mental health resources might be necessary going through what we've all just been through with COVID-19. So you're right.
I have a question, Elizabeth. And
Yes, sir.
since this is about as close to politics as I've ever wanted to be in my entire life, I really don't know. And I know there's such a thing as a bad question. That I'm about to prove that wrong. But I know that they'll start filing all the bills. Here's my question. As a school board, this is not what we do all day, every day, obviously. How do we keep track of what's being filed, who's filing what, so that we don't get a surprise, like we can't even believe that somebody was trying to do this. We didn't even know to talk to Representative Shine or Buckley about it. Without also, I know TASB probably put something out, but I also don't want us to be spoon-fed because TASB has supported some stuff in the past that we wouldn't have supported. How do we kind of keep track of what's out there and what's brewing so that we're not ignorant of the situation?
Appreciate you asking that. I think that first and foremost, several different organizations put out action alerts. And I would say they track when they see movement. The number of bills that gets filed is substantial.
Right.
So no one can stay on top of all of them, but when they start gaining traction, those action alerts really do help. I think that is why, to kind of Chris's point, you develop your legislative priorities, and we continue to talk about them and around them, and add more layers of color and student stories to those legislative priorities with our current elected officials as the session goes on, to hopefully they will catch those things for us and come to us and ask our opinion. I know Representative Shine has a great relationship with our superintendents in Bell County and makes that effort, but really it's a twofold. It's making sure we're proactively telling our story and what we're for and what we need and what we want, and adding that we have the best commodity, and that's kids in our classrooms and teachers that can tell the story of why it's necessary and what we need, and then relying heavily on those action alerts from a wide variety of organizations, not just TASB.
So, I mean, I guess we're going to need to get a list of, and I know you can go overboard because the first time I ever went to our education, that's put on, I signed up for things, and the next thing I knew, I was getting 50 emails a day from every organization, and I did not sign up for this. But a list of maybe the ones that we should be concentrating on. There's 2 or 3 out there that we can get action alerts, because it's not fair to put that on y'all and say, hey, we want to know what's going on. But if things are gaining traction, I don't want something to sneak up on us like fund balance or COVID, that they're going to take that over, and we have no idea it's coming until it's too late and we haven't had a chance to even voice our opinion about it.
We can definitely do that, and we'll add you to the team. I think it takes all of our eyes, all the cabinet team eyes, and all of my team's eyes looking at those alerts too, so we'll make sure to get that for you.
And I
And
will say,
Elizabeth, I'm sorry.
Oh,
Go,
sorry.
Janet, go ahead.
oh, sorry. We are super fortunate to have Hugh Shine, who is so communicative with our superintendents and meets regularly, not only with superintendents and education staff, but the community, and keeps us so informed. I mean, he's willing and able to answer any question at any time, and he's super on top of that because he's a pro-education advocate, public school advocate, which we are very fortunate.
Yeah, agreed.
And so I just wanted to remind the board that there are going to be grassroots meetings that we will be notified of, that will happen probably January, February, and that's something that TASB hosts over at the region centers that, like you talked about, Jeff, like in Waco for our area, and that's for all the local board members in that area. They offer an opportunity for you to join what's called the TASB Legislative Advisory Council, the LAC, and during those particular meetings at the region level, what you'll do is talk and discuss and decide upon the top priorities, and they've got a whole process outlined. And then you'll vote on which member from each district is identified as representing and going into those delegate assemblies that'll take place next year. So that process is there. So if there's a board member that's really wanting to take it to the next level, and I believe Janet and I know I for sure have done this. So you all let us know if that's something that you're eager to learn more about. Janet.
Y'all are missing Jeff pointing at Janet here, saying, "You got this."
Janet's already done it.
I do also want to real quickly give a shout out to Representative Buckley too, because he was on a superintendent call with us just a couple days ago with Bell County superintendents. And so to echo Janet's point with both Representative Shine and Representative Buckley, they have both met with us in our offices this fall. We're developing really good relationships with them, and they constantly are in communication with local superintendents. So we have a lot to be thankful for in that area.
And we've got a lot of great stories to share, so we'll be looking for ways all through the spring to tie your priorities to different activities that we have going on in the district to make sure they are aware.
So just based on this conversation, were you able to identify and list out our top priorities?
I have great direction now too. And if you can't tell,
Awesome.
we have a really passionate leader too that I think is gonna make sure that we get on the right track.
Awesome.
I get fired up when I hear about different parts of government taking away local control, and I believe the voice of local school boards is one of the most important things that we need to protect in public education in the state of Texas and across the nation. And so I do get fired up about these things, and I'm excited that y'all are interested in this topic too. I think what we'll do next steps is we'll do a little debrief based on this conversation. We'll put another iteration of some topics out for y'all and see maybe over the next month or so if we can come to some kind of conclusion that these seem to be really important points for us to advocate for Belton ISD moving forward. And then those that are involved in the local grassroots efforts have a list of Belton ISD priorities to go into those meetings with. And also when you get stopped in HEB and asked what we're thinking about for the legislative session, you got them right in your back pocket. I'll even make them into a business card for you if you want them. So you just let us know.
Well, I certainly appreciate this conversation during this particular time of the year because I can tell you that I personally have gone through those grassroots meetings not knowing what BISD's priorities were. We've never had that conversation as far as I know and I'm aware. So maybe someone else has a different take, but I certainly appreciate this conversation at this point in time.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate you. Next item.
Special thanks to Elizabeth for getting this going. I know that's
Indeed.
uncharted waters, and she did a great job navigating that. So thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
The next slide, please. The next topic that we're going to briefly discuss tonight is talking about the creation of values and belief statements by the Board of Trustees and Superintendent. Next slide. So why create these statements? So a couple of things about these types of statements that I think is important. One, it creates a shared voice amongst the board. We have the ability to make sure that as we continue to grow as a school district, that the Board of Trustees has an imprint on that growth in what the district is becoming as we continue to evolve. So it's a proactive way to ensure that our board has voice in moving us forward in our school district. It establishes some common agreements, provides foundation for administrative work, and what I want to elaborate on that one is if we know that we have certain beliefs as a school district, as a team of 8 that we have sitting up here in front, that these things matter to us in Belton ISD, it helps guide our work as an administrative team. We know then what our current board values the most. It preserves the foundation of BISD as we grow, and it helps ensure board impact on our system. Next slide. What are some examples? So what are these things anyway? In front of you, you have an example from Church-Cibolo ISD down in the San Antonio area, and they have belief statements that were crafted, I believe, by their Board of Trustees, along with their superintendent, that are part of their strategic plan. And you see those 9 belief statements that are listed there. This is publicized on their website, and they're as simple as, we believe all students have the capacity to learn and excel. And that stated belief helps guide work as an administrative team. That means that everybody that we serve in Belton ISD would have the focus that we need, and we believe that all can excel at high levels, and we're going to hold ourselves to that standard moving forward. You see another one, we believe in living our core values of leadership, character, commitment, service, and learning. So they've outlined some values that matter most to them as a school district, and they expect to see those lived out in every hire that they have, whether it's an administrative hire, a teacher hire, a bus driver hire, whatever it may be. Those value statements are lived out in their system, and they expect to be held to those value statements. Last one that I want to point out is number 7. We believe transparent, clear, and timely communication among all is critical to success. So a belief statement like that helps guide our communication practices as a school district. It helps make sure that we are saying we are looking at all groups in our school district to make sure they are getting timely and relevant information as a school district and as a school leadership team. Next slide. So on here, I've provided you some examples, and these aren't, tonight we're not going to go through all these and click on them and go in depth on them, but I provided you some examples in the state of Texas, one in New York. Just so happens that was a district that was about 50 minutes from where I grew up, and then one in North Carolina. And all of these school districts have identified beliefs or values that they believe are super important to them moving forward. I'll point out College Station ISD, and that is a school district that we are compared to often in the state of Texas, similar size to us, just down the road from us. And there are some belief statements there that their board settled on a while ago, and that helps guide their work, and that helps specifically guide their work in something called community-based accountability. So I share these things with you simply as links and some information for you to be able to research over the next couple of months, because I do believe this would be a good exercise for us as a team to go through and say, here are a few things that we believe as a team of 8 in Belton ISD that should really move us forward as a school district. These are the things that we want to hold tight to as we continue to grow and evolve. Next slide. One of the questions that comes up is, where does this fit in with our current work? Like, we're doing a lot of stuff right now, in case you haven't noticed. We have the journey of a graduate going on. We have a facilities assessment going on. We have all sorts of teacher feedback loops and things going on right now. So where does this fit in? So this is a quick overview for us of kind of what we're doing in setting direction for the school district. One of the first things we have to do is identify our current state of affairs in Belton ISD. And some of that is taking a look at data, like how have we achieved in the past and how are we doing according to different measurements and according to comparisons with other school districts. A facilities assessment is another way to get a understanding of the current state of affairs in our school district, to actually have a third party come in and rate our facilities and say, these are adequate or not adequate for what you're trying to attain in your schools, is an important piece of information for us to have. Our curriculum team went through something called curriculum audit training, and the whole idea behind that was to build skill and will and ability in our curriculum team to actually assess our written curriculum documents, and do they provide what we need to provide for our teachers in our schools, and how do we know and how do we make sure we're continuously improving on those? And then finally, that idea of feedback loops. That's one of the reasons we are constantly hosting feedback sessions with teachers in buildings across the district, is to hear what's on their mind on a regular basis. We ask questions, what's working well for you, and what are you really struggling with, and trying to get an understanding of the current state of affairs in our school district. But then you have to couple that not only with understanding where you currently are, with setting some direction for the future as well. And that idea of the goals that you all adopted in the spring was a really important step for us, because it helped us say, this is what our board of trustees and superintendent believe are important for us in the upcoming school year to move us forward as a school system. So those goals were an important step for us. You all know the journey of a graduate work is an important step for us in pulling over 100 community members together and saying, what are our hopes and dreams and aspirations for our kids, and what do we really want to achieve with them? That's helping to set direction. And then the values and belief statements is the third bullet there, and that's where this fits right in there. And then finally, throughout the spring, we're going to be talking to you all again and say, we have a current vision statement in Belton ISD, but as a current board of trustees, do you want to update that? Is there something that you would like to update based on this journey of a graduate work and all the data gathering that we've been doing? What is your vision as a board of trustees for our school district moving forward? And then finally, after we have an understanding of where we currently are and a picture of where we want to go for the future, we have to have a plan to get there. And that's what a strategic plan is. And so you've heard us talk about that strategic plan. That's our roadmap. It's kind of like in Google Maps, you have the ability to say on your phone, okay, here's my current location and here's where I want to go, and you press the button, and that map that's charted out for you, that's the strategic plan for a school district. It's how you get from one point to another. And so this defines the how we're going to be able to achieve big work that's been laid out in front of us moving forward. So those values and beliefs are a critical part of that setting direction for the future. It should give us a real solid foundation of what our board of trustees wants to see in our school system. Next slide. So the question is, what should y'all do next? What's the ask of you at this point? I would ask you to take a look at other districts, and I gave you some links there, but you can look anywhere you want. Look at other districts and see what they've articulated. What do they state? What resonates with you as a school board? And we'll be talking about that again in the future. informally ask some others in the community, what do we believe about schooling in our school district? And what do we value in the Big Red community? One of the things that inspired me the most about coming to the school district was there is a true sense of community in this community. It's not like that in every community, and I need people to know and understand that, but I also believe we want to preserve that. And so being able to articulate what we really value in this school district as we've opened a second high school and as we will continue to open campuses in the school district, I think is really important. And then brainstorm some statements. Just write down, it doesn't have to be anything perfect. This is all about just getting ideas down, but just write down some I believe statements or we believe statements and some I value statements. And through that, my hope is that if we can all get a few of those things down, maybe 2 or 3 for each board member, and I'll do some as well, we can gather those and come back together in a workshop setting this spring and start to craft those about what we believe and what we value as a team of 8 moving forward. So those 3 things right there are the ask of you moving forward in this conversation. I understand this is brand new work for us as a team of 8. Please know that there's no right answer or wrong answer. This is about us coming together as a team and saying really where we want to go and what we want to hold tight to. And so I appreciate y'all letting me chat a little bit about that tonight. Next slide. Any questions or thoughts on beliefs and values?
I've already taken a look at some of the examples you provided in the link, and that's a good starting point, is definitely those links and any others that that are comparable to Belton. So thank you for providing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so one of the things that hit me, oh, sorry. No, you good? Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Manuel,
Matt,
I'll choose.
That's why I'm looking at you.
I got you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Suzanne. Matt, the districts that you had given us as examples, what was the common denominator amongst them?
They were easy to search, and honestly, I'll just be real honest with you. I think you can find these in a lot of school districts, and you can find a lot of different varieties of them. As I was perusing through, I wanted to provide you just some in-state examples, some out-of-state examples. I think what you'll see is some variations in things, and so let me use the College Station one versus the Fairport, New York one. The Fairport, New York one, what you see is really statements that have been expanded on. It's like an essay almost about what they believe and why they believe it. Versus in College Stations, what they provided are really simple bulleted points that say these are the things that we value the most. Charlotte-Mecklenburg is I believe it's a school district that covers about 100,000 students, if I'm not mistaken, in North Carolina. And there's some really great work that comes out of Charlotte-Mecklenburg there, and I thought that was a good example as well. So I tried to provide you some districts that are similar to us. Shirt-Cibolo is a district that we're going to grow to their size. I mean, they're about 15,000, 16,000 right now, and about the same level of economically disadvantaged students in their school district. And so I tried to provide some examples for you that were similar to us and some that are outside our box.
How much connection do you think there is between, we don't have it yet, but when we have a journey of a graduate and what we believe in?
I think there's a direct connection from my point of view. And here's why. I think that if we can get to a point where we can articulate what we want for our students, and that's what that journey of a graduate really helps us do. We want experiences that engage students in these ways and that develop skills in these ways. Then we as a team of 8 can sit there and say, okay, what are the things that we value most in this school district that probably already exist that we want to preserve in this quest to do this for our students? And it helps us hold tight, especially to some of these cultural things that I think makes Belton ISD so much different than the other school districts around. It's the way we treat people. It's the feeling that you get when you see students in the classroom. It's knowing that we will do anything in the world for the kids that walk through our doors. And it's codifying some of those things that I think helped us get to this point to be a destination district in Central Texas, and helps us make sure that we preserve those moving forward while we're on that journey.
I was going right down that same path, right? So sitting in that meeting the other night, the Journey of a Graduate meeting, you know, it hit me. It's great that we're doing this for the students, right, and for the kids, and what do we expect to come out of it? But how do we then translate that to other aspects of the district? Like, how do we translate that to our business operations? How do we translate that to, human resources and hiring, right? And what does the portrait of a BISD employee look like, right? Because some of this stuff will be relevant, right, that they're talking about, but for journey of a graduate, but there may need to be some additional thought in some of those other areas, right? I was looking on our site here, right, and I could pretty easily find, the motto, the mission, the vision, the 2021 goals, the instructional expectations, but I don't necessarily see a set of like core values that, like, an employee, like that we want an employee, right? And so, I'd love to be able to arm Todd with, here's the things that you should go out and get for us, right? Go out and find and foster and make sure everybody gets, and help to make sure that, it truly is the destination, and here's what we expect when you come from an employee standpoint. So I think there's a lot we could do. I'm not saying we've got issues, right? But we could take it to yet another level by maybe looking at some of those other areas too.
I'm going to use an example, Todd, and if you'd like to come up and say anything, you're more than welcome to. I don't want to put him on the spot, but he and I have talked a little bit about these things in the past and how important these things are. I'm going to use the example of Google, and whether you like Google or don't like Google, I'm going to share an example from visiting them when I was in a former job. Went down, visited down there, took a look at their workspace, asked a lot of questions, talked about how they manage, how are they managing? Because they're growing exponentially at the time. So what do they do? And one of the things that they said is that they hire for googliness. And I share that because I asked some probing questions on that. And it wasn't about your resume that you provided in front of people, but it was about certain things that they wanted to see in their workplace, and did the person that they were hiring fit the profile for what they needed in their workplace. And that goes to what I think Chris is talking a little bit about, is some of these things, and if I can tie it into the journey of a graduate, collaboration might come up on this journey of a graduate, right? And so one of our belief statements might have to do with collaboration, that we believe that adult collaboration and modeling good collaboration benefits students, staff, and our community alike. And being able to say that we expect that from every staff member, and that we're going to do that because it's important for our kids too, I think is where the tie-in could happen in all of this. So I think those values and beliefs can really guide, in a human resources mindset, what we're needing moving forward. Thank you very much. I appreciate y'all engaging in that.